What is going on, everybody? This is Clay, bringing another episode of Gear Talk. And today I was thinking about the idea of balance and bringing some sort of balance to your tone. And so what I mean by that is, in general, I would say that a lot of people try to achieve some sort of tonal balance with their rig. And that balance is between brightness and darkness. You don't want to be too bright, then it becomes ice picky and very yucky. And you don't want to be too dark, because then, you're not going to stick out in the mix, and it's just going to be too flubby and muddy, and there's no definition. So kind of thinking about different ways that people go about trying to achieve some balance. And in general, I would say that this is like a pretty common thing that I have seen when looking at people's rigs, or just the way in which people get sounds that I like. So like, for example, let's say you start off with something like a Strat or a Tele. I mean, by themselves, these guitars are naturally going to be very bright. Especially when you're talking about the bridge pickup, and even like, the out-of-phase positions too. Like there's not a lot of heft or thickness. They're known through cutting the mix well, but they're not known for like the chugging and like there's just not a lot of bass frequencies going on. So a lot of times you'll see people, it's almost like adding spices. They'll try to use other parts of their rig to, kind of supplement that. So like, for example, Hendrix, he used fuzz faces. A lot of the fuzz faces that I have played through, there is a ton of just girth and thickness that they bring. Not just like sustain and gain, but just raw thickness. And I think they sound great with Strats and Teles. And on the other hand, like something like a Les Paul, I have not personally had a lot of luck dialing in something like a fuzz face with a Les Paul. So that's just one example. And then on the other hand, let's talk about Les Pauls. So a lot of those kind of guys will use treble boosters. That's classic from the 60s. And that's because these guys are dealing with Les Pauls, which are by nature very dark. There's thick mahogany, they're shorter scale. You got humbuckers. So overall, their starting point with the guitar is going to be very dark. So putting something like a treble booster in the mix is going to really help punch through some of those high frequencies and also help to tame up some of those lower frequencies. And so, other ways in which, let's go back to Strats and Teles, something like thicker strings, that can really help to, provide some beef to your sound. I know Stevie Ray did that, and I know lots of other guys. And I used to run 10 to 52s, so there's a 52 on the low E and then a 10 on the high, so it's kind of like a combo set. And I always thought that the low strings sounded amazing on my Strat. It was a really, really cool sound, and it really was effective at bringing some thickness to that. And another thing too, like there's a reason why tube screamers are so popular, and that's because they have so much mid-range. Now, talk about an area of tonal balance. A lot of times people will pair a tube screamer with something like a black-face Fender type amp, and these amps don't have a lot of mid-range. They're pretty scooped. And there's bass and there's treble, but there isn't a lot of that, thick mid-range. And I've also actually, I remember seeing, some metal guys, guys that play really, really heavy, they find some effective use out of tube screamers as well because of that. If their rhythm tone is this really, chugging, scooped thing, to put a tube screamer in the mix is really going to help. It's going to help you cut. A lot of times you don't need to add a lot of volume, but if you can just add some of those right frequencies in the mid-range, that can really help your sound cut through. And, in general, it's funny because, so, from my own personal experience, I gravitate towards single coils. Stratocasters, Telecasters, P90s. I like starting with a bright guitar, and then using other elements to bring some thickness and heft, whether that's with my pedals or my amp or my speaker choice, string gauge. I like, so something like an overdrive pedal. What I look for in an overdrive pedal, if I'm like just kind of trying to get a gauge of it, of what it's kind of like, I will look for words like fat, or I will, something that's got some heft or some bass to it. That attracts me to an overdrive pedal. Whereas on the other hand, like if something is a little bit more cutting, that's not what I'm looking for, because I already have that naturally in the guitar, and I'm trying to make up for the lack of bass somewhere else in the rig. And on the other hand, I have not had very much success dialing in good Les Paul type sounds, humbucker sounds. I think a lot of guys who play those rigs sound amazing, but just like the way that I think about my rig, that doesn't compute in my mind, because I'm always trying to fatten things up. Whereas with a Les Paul, if I would plug a Les Paul into my rig, I guarantee it would sound muddy, especially on the neck pickup. And you hear, I see that all over the place when talking about like Les Paul type pickups. The big thing, especially with the neck pickup, is to find something that's clear, something that is not muddy. Whereas, like, if you want to talk about Strat pickups, nobody ever says like, "Oh man, I love these pickups because they're so not muddy." I mean, to be honest, like, it's pretty rare for a Strat pickup to be muddy. Whereas, like, to find a Les Paul pickup that it has that clarity, that almost single coil type clarity, I mean, that's pretty rare and that's pretty special. And I think that is an interesting thing to think about if you're looking at your rig, with the strengths and weaknesses, and how to kind of maybe improve your tone a little bit. There does seem to be a sort of like a middle ground, where if you're starting with something that's very bright, you want to make it darker. You want to bring some heft and some thickness. Whereas if you're starting with something that's dark, you want to go the other way, and you want to introduce things into your rig that will help it punch and cut through. So there seems to be for classic rock, blues, country, I mean, a lot of these, really, really well-established guitar sounds, there seems to be a middle ground that is ideal. Not too much high, not too much low. Maybe that's just the nature of the guitar spectrum and how we tune it, and and whatnot. But there definitely seems to be that sort of like target frequency that the guitars is going after. So if you guys are dialing in your rig, I would encourage you to keep that in mind. And that's all I got today. Peace out. Let me know. I'd love to hear some comments about what you guys think, or how you use the concept of balance in your rig, and what you do to add heft, or maybe to add punch. What works for you. All right. See you guys later.